Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you how to query a database without writing any SQL queries. We will be building a simple UiPath automation process that leverages the power of ChatGPT to query any relational database. Then we'll show you how to use UiPath Autopilot for everyone to call that automation using natural language. So let's get started. All right, so the first step we need to do is to create a connector to ChatGPT. And to do that, we need to go to the integration service and select the Autopilot folder. And then from the connectors screen, we need to search for OpenAI. So once you click on that, you can click on Connect to OpenAI, and you should have an API key that you obtain from OpenAI platform. You can specify that API key here and connect. So I've already done that, and as you can see here under my connections, I already have a ready connector to be used in my automations. Now, before we build our automation process, I want to show you the actual relational database that we will be working with throughout this demo. So this is a SQL Server database that basically has two tables, inventory and sales. If I query those two tables, you can see that the inventory table has a few products. Each product is of specific brand, and each product has a current stock level and a restock threshold and the current price. And in the sales table, you can see that which items have been sold with referencing the item ID from the inventory table and the quantity that have been sold and at which date and time this item was sold. So that's basically the structure of the database that we will be working with in the next few steps. Now, let's have a look at the automation process that we will be using in this demo. The first thing we need to have a look at is the input and output parameters. So if we go to the data manager here from the right-hand side and go to the arguments, you can see that I have one input parameter and one output parameter. So the first input argument is this one. I call it imprompt. And that's basically the question that the user will be asking when they use Autopilot for everyone. So that's very important to configure, and the type of this parameter is text. And then once we run our query against the database and retrieve the results that we are intended to see, we need to pass that back to the user as text. So that's why we created this output parameter here as well, with this kind of configuration. Now, let's have a look at the steps we configured inside the automation process. So the first step we need to do here is to connect to the database. For that, I added this connect to database activity. And if we look at the properties here on the right-hand side, we selected the provider as Microsoft.data.SQL client because we are connecting to a SQL Server database. And then we have to configure the connection string to the actual database that has the data. So for that, I used this particular connection string, which works for me without any issues. Now, in this step, this second step, we need to get the database schema that will be queried by the automation. This is a very important step because before passing any question to ChatGPT, we need to make sure that ChatGPT understands the nature of the database schema that we want to query in order to create a proper SQL statement for it. And to do that, we need to run a specific query, this one that you see here on the screen, and get the actual database schema. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically utilizing the database connection we created in the step number 1. Command type is text, and then I will run this query against the database. If I switch back here to SQL Server Management Studio, this is basically the query I will be running from my automation. If I run it here, it returns basically a list of table names and the associated columns and their data types. So that's basically what will happen in this step. And the output will be a data table that contains that information that we have here. And in step 3, what I'm doing here, I'm basically using the invoke code activity to convert the output of that run query activity, which is the data table, into a string that I will eventually pass to ChatGPT. So basically, if I switch back here and I run this query, as you've seen, we get a data table, but to pass it to ChatGPT, I need it in a string format. So that's basically the string that I will be generating using the invoke activity. So each table will be in one line, and all the related columns and their data types will be appended to the table, and for each table will have its data in a new line like this. All right, so if we have a look at the arguments that we have configured in this invoke activity, we can click here and we can see that we have one in argument and one out argument. So the in argument is basically the data table that we got for the database schema. So we provide that as an input to my VB expression, and the output is basically a string that will convert my data table to that string format I've just shown you. And that string that I'm using is saved in that the text DB schema variable. Now let's move to the most important step in our automation, which is step 4. So for that, I added the generate chat completion from OpenAI activity. And if we look at the properties here, we can see that we selected the connection that we configured in integration service to connect to OpenAI ChatGPT service. And I selected the model GPT-4o. You have a few options here, but GPT-4o is the best I've seen so far. And then the most important part to be configured here is the prompt. So let me open that so you can see it clearly. So what I'm saying here is, based on the following SQL database schema, which is basically the one we generated in the previous steps, and I'm passing that schema here as text, I'm asking ChatGPT to convert the question that we will get from the user, which is this one in prompt, into a T-SQL query. So T-SQL is basically the language understood by Microsoft SQL Server. If you are using an Oracle database, for example, then you can say it's a PL/SQL instead of T-SQL. And then asking ChatGPT to output only the raw SQL. I don't want any extra comments. I don't want any further explanations, just the raw SQL. And I'm providing more instructions here around the text data types or text columns that we have in the database. So I'm saying just make sure that you deal with the case sensitivity of the text variables when you do comparisons, and use like and wildcards instead of equal when you do comparisons, and make sure that you convert plural words. Like, for example, if I'm asking about washing machines, this will be converted automatically to a singular format or singular form, which is washing machine, for example. And then that's basically the query we will pass to ChatGPT, and we would expect to get a SQL statement as an output from that prompt. Then in step 5, I'm adding again another run query activity which basically will run the query generated by ChatGPT. So this is the output we get from the ChatGPT activity. We pass it here in the SQL query parameter. And we're also utilizing the same database connection we configured here in step 1. And once this runs successfully, we should get an output in the format of a data table, and we save it here in this variable DT query result. And finally, step number 6, we are basically setting the output argument that I've shown you earlier. So we are setting that value to the output of the query, but we are basically converting the data table that we got from the query into a string. So for that, we have this expression. So I'm just converting each row into one string, and if the row has multiple values, I'm separating the values by comma and spaces. So that's basically the output that will be passed back to Autopilot everyone and will be displayed to the end user. Now, once your automation is ready, we need to make sure that it's published correctly. So you need to click on the publish button here, and from the location drop-down list, make sure that you use the Orchestrator Autopilot feed and then click publish. This will basically publish your automation into the Autopilot folder in the Orchestrator. So it can be used later in the Autopilot for everyone in your assistant. All right, now we need to configure our automation properly in order to see it and use it in Autopilot for everyone. For that, we need to go to UiPath Cloud and then go to the admin section. And on the right-hand side, we need to click on the AI Trust Layer. So let's open that. And then from here, under Autopilot for everyone, we need to select our tenant. For me, now I have only the default tenant. And then we need to go to Tools. Under Tools, we need to configure the tools. And from here, we need to select the Autopilot folder. And once I select that, I will be able to see my automation that I just deployed a few seconds ago. So we can select that. So once I select my automation, there are a few configurations that we need to play with here. The first thing is the automation prompt description. This is really important because this is how Autopilot for everyone will understand that the question you're asking will basically be answered by this particular automation. So we have to give the description very good instructions, and in order to make sure that it's triggered when we ask any questions related to it. So you can see here I'm saying use this automation to respond to any questions related to sales or inventory. And the second thing we need to do here is to enable for this Autopilot. So I'm basically enabling this automation to be used inside Autopilot for everyone. And here you have some output instructions, configurations. You can just summarize the output in a user-friendly way, or put it in a tabular format or bulleted form, or any of these options you can select. Normally we leave it on the default option. And here you have the input argument that we have configured in our automation. It appears automatically. There are some settings that you can play with here, but for now we'll just leave it on the default. And then once you configure all these settings, you need to save your configuration and move to the next step. All right, now we will switch to UiPath Assistant. So as you can see here on the screen, we have it open and we are already on the Autopilot tab. It's the first tab here on the top left corner. And if we go to the settings from that icon at the top right corner, we need to go to automations. And under this section, you can see that our automation that we configured in the AI Trust Layer already appears here and it's turned on. You have the option to turn it off as well if needed, but by default, it will become enabled so you can use it with Autopilot for everyone. All right, now let's put Autopilot for everyone on the test and see if it will give us the intended results. So I will start by asking this question. Which items I need to restock? Show me the results in a tabular format. And let's run it. So what happens now is Autopilot for everyone is trying to analyze my request to see which automation it needs to call. And as you can see here, it identified the get inventory sales data automation is the right one to answer this question. So I will just run it. And let's give it a few seconds to come back. The automation ran successfully. Now Autopilot is formatting the output so I can understand it. So it's saying based on the inventory and sales data, Sony is the item that needs to be restocked. So if we look at the database here, we can see that the Sony TV is at the stock level of 3 and our restock threshold is 5. So it actually identified correctly that item that it needs to be restocked. Okay, now let's ask another question. So we will ask if any Apple or Sony products were sold in May, and let's see what we will get. So again, it tries to understand my request, it identified the correct automation to run, and then we can hit run. Takes a few seconds, came back, formatting the output at the moment, and let's see. So based again on the sales data, we can see that one Sony TV was sold at this price and no Apple products reported to be sold in May as well. So is that true? Let's see. We don't have any Apple products here, so that's actually correct. And if we look at the Sony TV, this one is with item ID 1, and if we look at the sales data here, we have item ID 1. Yeah, so it's only one item, one TV that was sold, and if we look at the price, it's 600 for the TV, and that's what we see here, so that's absolutely correct. All right, let's give it one more test. So we will ask how much revenue made from selling fridges in May. And let's see what it will come back with. Again, same automation has been identified. We run it. Automation is successful. Now we give it a second to format the output. And it came back and said the total revenue from selling fridges was 1,600. So the fridge here is item number 3 and the item price is 800. If we look at the sales data, we can see that 2 sales transactions have been recorded and each sales transaction has the quantity of 1. So this means 2 fridges were sold, each at 800, which means 1,600 is the total revenue, which is absolutely correct as we can see here in the Autopilot response. All right, now you might be wondering if there is a way to hide that confirmation that we get every time we ask Autopilot to do something for us. So the answer is yes, there is one configuration that we need to turn on in order to get rid of that confirmation message. So let me show you. If we switch back to the AI Trust Layer configuration screen, we can see that option here set as pre-response action. So that option, if we turn it on, it will basically run the automation automatically without confirming or without asking the user to confirm anything. It will just run automatically. So I will just set that to true and always make sure that you save, and then we will go back to Autopilot and see how the interaction will be different in this case. All right, so let's see now how Autopilot for everyone will behave after we enable that feature in AI Trust Layer. So I will ask a new question: how many irons sold in May and how much we made from selling them? So I will just post that question. It will start to analyze, and you see now it's not asking me for any confirmation. It just went ahead and ran the get inventory automation and will come back with some results. So it says the number of irons sold is 2 and the total revenue was 240. So let's have a look here. So the irons are item number 4. The item price is 120. And if we go here, we can see that there was only one sale transaction for irons, and the quantity was 2. So basically 2 items or 2 units were sold, and that's the total revenue made out of that sale. So that's absolutely correct. And lastly, we will ask this final question. In May, when most of the sales transactions happened, is it in the morning or in the evening? So let's ask this question and see if ChatGPT will get it right. Now, again, it's running the automation automatically. And let's see what the output will be. All right, so evening sales, 3 transactions, morning sales, 2 transactions. So let's see if that's true. So if we look at the sales table here, we can see that this transaction was in the morning and this one as well. So 2 transactions in the morning, and then we have this, and that in the afternoon or in the evening. So the output that we got here is absolutely correct. This shows you how powerful is the integration between UiPath automations and ChatGPT, where we were able to dynamically create SQL statements and query database in just a few simple steps. And that's all. I hope the content was useful. If you like that video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next videos. Thank you.